In the previous steps of the tutorial, we created a simple object called lid box, which has a bottom, 4 sides, and a lid with optional pivots. Now let's use the fact that we employed box primitives to create the bottom, the side, the front, and the lid, and the boxes in 3ds Max have segment parameters. This means that we can create our own segmentation controls to control the number of segments along the length, the width, and the height. Let's put this control after the height, call it length segs, change the type to integer, and set the default to 1. Then we can copy and change the name to width segs and height segs. Same for the user interface controls. They will all have a default of 1 and the type will be integer. Obviously, we now need new spinners. So right after the thickness, we'll add a new spinner called length segs. We'll change also the name and the range from 1 to 10 with the default of 1, and the type will be integer. Now we can copy the name of the spinner for the width and the height, and also change the text displayed in the user interface. The ranges will remain 1 to 10 for all, and they will be of type integer. Let's evaluate and take a look at the user interface of one of our objects. As you can see, we now have spinners for the length segments, the width segments, and the height segments. Our user interface is getting a little bit long, so let's add some groups around related controls. This will allow us to visually separate the different control types. For example, let's call this one dimensions, and we'll put the length, width, height, and thickness in this group. Then we create a group called segments, and we'll put the length, width, and height segments in this group, and the last group will be lid parameters, and we'll keep all the pivot and lid controls in this group. If we would evaluate now, we have the controls nicely split into logical groups, dimensions, segments, and lid parameters. What is left to do is obviously add the parameters length segs, width segs, and height segs to the boxes used to create our lid box. Let's copy the name of the parameter length segs into the construction line of the bottom box. The construction parameter of a box primitive is called exactly the same as our parameter, so we say length segs of the box that will be created will be set to the length segs parameter that we defined. Similarly, we can grab the width segs and set them to our parameter. Only for the height segs, we're not going to specify our value, but we'll keep them 1 because the bottom box has already a thickness and we don't want to segment it even more. Let's evaluate the code and see if it works. If we would take a look at the bottom box changing the number of segments will change the tessellation of the box, but changing the height segments doesn't affect the height segs of the bottom box, because we want to keep it a single segment with the thickness that we have specified. Let's now move to the next box. This is the side box. We will specify for the side box that the length segs will be equal to the length segs, but the width segs will be equal to 1, and the height segs will be equal to the height segs. We evaluate again and take a look at the result. If we change parameters, the width segs are not affecting the side boxes, but the length segs are changing, and if we change the height segs, we get more segments along the height. We can do the same now for the third box. This is the front box. In the case of the front box, we set the length segments to 1. The width segs will be equal to the width segs, and the height segs will remain as they are. Evaluating again and looking at the result, we have now the width segs affecting the front, but the length segs won't touch it, and the height segs are the same for the side box and for the front box. What is left is obviously to get the segmentation of the bottom box and put it onto the lid. We use exactly the same parameters, and now if we take a look at the lid, it is going to be segmented just like the bottom box. It doesn't get any height segments, but the width and length are affected it. The reason we put segmentation on our primitive is to be able to deform it smoothly using modifiers. For example, if we add a noise modifier, enable the fractal and set to, for example, 20-20-20, we can now have more vertices that can deform over time. Without the segmentation, our box would only distort but not really deform nicely. Same can be used, for example, if we increase the number of height segments and add a bend modifier, we can smoothly bend our box, just like with all other primitives in 3ds Max. Now we can save the current version of the script as step 5 and continue adding features to our primitive.